All right, so thank you all for the invitation, everyone. I'm Roy Tucker. I'm the city attorney for the city of Muskogee. And so I wanted to say thank you to Muskogee Equality for reaching out to me and asking me to come and speak on this topic. And I thank Mayor Coleman for coming to visit with us as well. So what I'm going to do tonight is talk to you a little bit about what the law is, include a little bit of a civics lesson. I will strive not to make it boring, but I do promise that it will be short. And so if you have any questions as we move forward, feel free to interrupt me. So what I want to talk about now is what the law is, the hate law in the state of Oklahoma. So this is what has been passed by the state legislature and approved by the governor and is being enforced at our district court level. And so this is in Title 21, Section 850. And you will notice the highlighted portions that it says, no person shall maliciously and with the specific intent to intimidate or harass another person because of that person's race, color, religion, ancestry, national origin, or disability. So what do you see that's missing from there?
Sexual orientation.
Spot on.
Identity.
Yes.
And gender identity.
All of it. These are the only categories in the Oklahoma state hate law. Okay? So these things apply to assault and battery, damage to property, or any of those two, as well as with the specific intent to transmit any electronic communications, Facebook stalking, those kind of things, Facebook bullying, as well as broadcasting, publishing, or distributing any material that relates to an intent to attack someone based upon those criteria. Okay, so first offense is a misdemeanor, $1,000 fine, and up to a year in prison. Second and subsequent offense is $10,000 fine and is a felony, up to 10 years in prison. Again, does not include sexual orientation. So, what about cities? So, cities in Oklahoma are political subdivisions, which means that we're effectively the children of the state. And so our authority derives from them, specifically the Oklahoma Constitution and the laws that the legislature passes. Okay? And so, in the Constitution, there's Oklahoma Constitution, not U.S. The Oklahoma Constitution, there's a provision that allows any city that has a population of 2,000 inhabitants or more to frame its own charter. Okay? So the charter becomes the organic law of the city and is effectively the constitution for the municipal boundaries. And so we have a little more freedom in developing laws as long as we have a provision in our charter that allows us to do that. Let me give you the most boring example I can think of. Planning and zoning. Whether property is zoned residential or commercial. So we have broad authority to do that regardless of what the state does because it is framed that way in the city charter. Okay? So let's say the city of Muskogee has a municipal court. So the municipal court that we have is not in our charter. So how do we have authority to create one? By state law. Because there's a state statute that allows any city to create a municipal court. And so it is within those restrictions that we have to work in order to pass any legislation that is different than the state has. And we've already established the state provides no protection for gender identity, expression, sexual orientation. Okay? So now let's look at a couple of other things. So there are two types of municipal courts. One is a court of record and one is not of record. The only difference between those two categories are the size of your city. So Tulsa and Oklahoma City are our courts of record, and every other city in Oklahoma are courts not of record. And so what that means is the ability to jail and fine is reduced for cities that have a court not of record, like Muskogee. So, let's first look at what Tulsa did. In September of last year, they adopted the first hate crime ordinance that covered gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression. All right? They held a punishment fee for violation of that, 6 months in jail or a fine not to exceed $1,000. Now, where did they come up with the arbitrary number of 6 months or $1,000? Because that is the maximum allowed by the state in the state statute that provides for courts of record. Okay, so that's maximum. So they went maximum on it. So the actual ordinance I have included in here. I will email this PowerPoint to Scotty. He can send it out to whoever wants to, so you can spend some time digesting this. But basically, it is the exact same thing as the state law with the inclusion of those additional 4 categories. However, of course, it does not have any provision for felony because in Oklahoma, only the state district courts can prosecute felonies, not any municipal courts. Those are only for misdemeanors. All right, Oklahoma City. Oklahoma City, from what I can tell, and I don't think that it was accurate, it looks like their ordinance was effective in 1988. I know that can't be right, but that's all I could find on it. And you can't get anyone Oklahoma City Attorney's Office to answer the phone, so I couldn't verify it. So, they have sexual orientation generally contained within their intimidation, harassment, and vandalism provisions. So it's sort of a hate crime. It's not framed as such like Tulsa's is, but it covers basically the same thing. And so that allows for a penalty of $750 and jail not to exceed 6 months. So the jail is statutory maximum. $750 is the maximum amount for a court not of record. Oklahoma City has a court of record. I don't have an explanation why they went from 1,000 to 750, but nonetheless, that's what they passed. All right, so here is the state law limitation that I have been referencing. So in here, you'll talk about the maximum for speeding, the maximum for drug-related offenses, and then the catch-all for all other offenses, no more than $750. So there's the maximum in Title 11, Section 14 of 111C. Additionally, we, as a court not of record, can only impose prison for 60 days, not 6 months. 6 months is reserved for courts of record, which we're a court not of record. So maximum that we can do, Muskogee, 750, 60 days in jail. Now, here's the catch that we will internally have to work through. If the punishment potentially includes jail time, you have to include a right to trial by jury. We haven't had a jury trial in Muskogee in 30 years. So, we'll have to figure out how to do that. I mean, we know how to do it, but logistically how to work it all out. So, that is something that we will also be working on. Now, that assumes somebody demands a jury trial. Now, they can wait, of course, but a couple of other ordinances that I wanted you to be aware of, since we're talking about hate crime and discrimination, kind of, I wouldn't say globally, but statewide. The city of Norman adopted an anti-discrimination ordinance in 2019. Now, does not cover hate crime, but it does prohibit discrimination in employment, housing, and what's one other category? And I forgot what it was. Employment, housing, there was something else. Maybe promotion, but I think that was covered by employment. At any rate, they have adopted that non-discrimination policy, and they process that through their civil rights commission that they have. Now, do I think it's necessary to have that for Muskogee? I don't, and let me tell you why. Because federal law provides for that and provides much greater protection than we can provide. Now, we as the city assist in those investigations, the fair housing investigation, EEOC investigations, but sexual orientation, gender expression is all covered by Title VII, which covers that, and the Fair Housing Act. So those are all covered. So I think if we get in the mix and we have very limited resources, we have the potential to mess it up. So I prefer just to assist our government friends if they ask. Just as a general search, I noticed that towns like Lindsay and Salisaw also have discrimination ordinances that include sexual orientation. Just a bit of trivia, in case you didn't know that. And they were very similar to Norman's, except they don't have a Civil Rights Commission to investigate it. They just prohibit it by ordinance. So it appears that there's really no enforcement because, like us, limited resources, you rely on the federal government and you assist the federal government with doing it. Because those federal investigators, we've been involved in one fair housing complaint. They're bulldogs. So you don't have to worry about the federal government not doing what they need to do. All right, what about Muskogee? As I said again, we are a court not of record, and so our maximum fine would be $750 as the fine, and then 60 days in jail. One of the other provisions that we pointed out is, yes, here, that you cannot make a state law felony a municipal misdemeanor. So that's prohibited strictly by the state. So we would not be able to do that. So what Mayor Coleman is going to introduce and what he was speaking about is Muskogee hate crime ordinance, which would mirror what Tulsa has done. In reviewing both Tulsa and Oklahoma cities, I think Tulsa's is better. And so we would include the same definition, which would include sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, as well as sex. And so that would also include race, color, creed, all those other things, which we don't have any ordinances that cover at all right now. And so we would propose that. I think the mayor told me he wanted it. Unfortunately, it won't be in the month of June for Pride, but will certainly be done before your Pride Festival. Yes. So you might be able to talk about it then and speak on that.
We definitely will.
We do anticipate that probably the second week of July after the holiday. Because as you know, with political bodies, you have to do a little politics to make sure that you've got the votes that you need to pass it. And so, anyway, do we have any questions? Yes, sir.